Welcome to Fairy Tale Access, where the head fairy's quest is to prove that fairy tales do exist in actual time rather than once upon a time. Together, we will unravel the heroes, young and old, who turn dreams into reality. These are the people who still believe in happily ever after. The discoveries will bend even our most cynical non-believers into believing in fairy tales. Hi, welcome to Fairy Tale Access. I am so excited to introduce you to Jeffrey Kohanek from Southern California by Skype with his amazing series that you guys are just gonna love. It's perfect for young adults. Thank you for joining me. How are you today?
I'm doing great. Thanks for having me, Denise.
Oh, my pleasure. Okay, so you have to tell me how you came up with these young adult coming of age kind of novels. They're amazing.
Okay. Well, I've been an epic fantasy reader most of my life, and I discovered, I dabbled with like Narnia books and then Lord of the Rings, that type of thing. Eventually, I found a series called The Belgariad by David Eddings. This is back in the 80s.
Okay.
And that really inspired me. I just fell in love with epic fantasy after that, and for decades, it's mostly what I've read. The books that we're going to talk about today really are inspired by how I felt as a teenager reading those books, and just the sense of discovery and magic and adventure, and that's it's the type of story I like to tell.
Wow. I hope you didn't grow up feeling like this cast does in these books. They're mostly outcast or the unchosen.
Yeah, I mean, I guess you have to have characters that have a challenge, right? And sometimes the challenge also tells a story on the backside. For instance, my first series, Ruins of Issalia. So as you mentioned, the main character is an outcast. So it's the side plot, or what's happening in the background of the theme, is about prejudice and inclusion, right? So you kind of get to see the world through his eyes when he's being treated poorly. And then in my other series, Everson, the main character, or one of the main characters, is physically disabled. So he has different struggles. And I think it's fun and interesting to have characters that have these backgrounds that have challenges to them.
Yeah. Definitely. And it's nice that the way that you have the sister who's the actual protector in the Warden's purpose.
Yeah. So that and that kind of her growing up with a brother who, can't walk, and he gets, picked on, bullied, right? So it's natural for her to stand up for him. And that kind of builds her into the person that she's going to be. So he is driven by the fact that he wants to be useful. He just wants to do things that make a difference in people's lives. And that's driven by his own, inadequacies, we'll say, right? Because he's brilliant, but he's disabled. So he's got, two sides there. Well, for her, growing up with him, defending against bullies, etc., that kind of forces her into a fierce, brave, bold person, which makes her perfect for what she becomes later on. She goes to the military academy, and in later books, she ends up being kind of like a spy, which is pretty cool.
Definitely. Where did you grow up?
I grew up in the woods of northern Minnesota. And my childhood is pretty interesting. I mean, it was mostly in the 70s, but I equate it to kind of Huckleberry Finn, Tom Sawyer kind of adventures. Because I would get up every day and go out in the woods and build forts and rafts and get into all kinds of trouble. So, that childhood, that background kind of like feeds into the stories I tell.
Oh, I can definitely see that now. Were there a lot of caves in Minnesota growing up?
I wish there were more. There are a few. But at the same time, when I was inside, I was into comic books, so I'd read comic books, and so superheroes. You can see some of that influence in my stories as well. In the Marvel universe, I tell people all the time, my books are kind of like when you go to see a Marvel movie. They're just fun. You're going to get just a fun adventure. And,
Definitely. It kept me up forever. I just enjoyed reading them so much. It was such a great adventure. Like
thanks.
Harry Potter, but in a completely different realm. I love following these guys. I love seeing their personalities develop. It was amazing. Really well done.
That's great. Thank you.
When did you start writing?
Well, so going back to the childhood, right? So I said I was into comic books. I used to actually make my own comics because I would like to draw and write. So I had kind of a creative flair my whole life. But, you get into high school and college, and the more responsible route is to do something, that can pay you, pay the bills. So I actually went to college to become an engineer. I took creative writing in college, but, that's not what I did for a long time. Then about 5 years ago, my kids were getting older. My son was graduating from high school, et cetera, and I started getting more time on my hands. So I thought, I'm going to use that time and start writing the story that's been in my head for some time. And, a year later, the first book from the Runes of Issalia was done. And that's The Buried Symbol, right?
Wow.
So that was 5 years ago. So 5 years later, now I have 8 books published. My 9th comes out. In fact, I'll have at least 10 by the end of the year. But 8
wow.
now.
When's the 9th coming out? Rather soon,
Actually,
right?
October 1st.
Oh.
Yeah, it's the first book in a new series. The next one will come out in November. There might be a third at the end of December, or it might slide into January. I'll find out. I'm not quite done with it yet.
That's great. And how do your hobbies influence your work? Because I saw something about spelunking, spelunking.
Yeah.
What is that?
That is when you basically explore caves.
Oh, really?
So, yeah, and I mean, I've done some cool spelunking outings, and it's kind of like part of these adventure outings. One, for instance, is in Northern California, where I rappelled into a cave that's big enough to fit the Statue of Liberty. So you're just hanging by a rope, going down this rope into the cave, and then you walk around through a series of tunnels in pitch black with a helmet with a light on your head, and eventually you come out the other side. It's very cool.
That is very cool. Wow. What about snorkeling? Where is one of your favorite places?
Oh, well, I've been to probably a dozen or 15 maybe Caribbean islands. So anywhere with clear water, warm water. Also Hawaii. So any place where I could find fish and sea turtles and manta rays, anything.
Wow. So I can see how like bungee jumping, rock climbing. Is it spelunking?
Spelunking, yeah.
It's snorkeling, biking, skiing, rappelling. What's rappelling?
Rappelling is so it's the opposite of rock climbing. Rock climbing is going up. Rappelling is when you have a rope and you just kind of hop down. You have, something called a belay that allows you to kind of like slide down the rope in big hops. So yeah, it's a cool way to go down a cliff.
Definitely, and I imagine it really helps with the adventures that you put together in these novels.
Yeah, I think if you go out and live a little bit of adventurous life, it can feed into your muse and you can be more creative. Yeah.
Wow. Was there somebody that you knew growing up that was overcoming disabilities that drew you to the character you created in the Warden's Purpose?
I don't know if there's anybody specific, but I don't. I had the idea. I mean, that whole series is built around the idea of those two siblings, and other characters definitely come in as the series advances. but they remain central. And the important thing with Everson is that I wanted him to be very, very, very smart, right? Because his inventions are going to be a big part of the story that I'm telling. But at the same time, he needed to have other challenges that would drive him in that direction, and that's how the idea for the disability came out.
Wow, you have a really keen insight into how young people think and deal with different things going on.
Yeah, I try to. I mean, it helps having a couple teenagers in the household, right? So I've been through that. In fact, I also have a foreign exchange student right now, so I have another teen in the household, even though my other two are in college right now.
Wow. Do you have a girl and a boy? Two boys, two girls?
Yeah, a girl and a boy.
Oh, okay. So that sibling relationship might have come from them growing up a little bit.
Yeah, actually, they were very close. So there's a little bit of that in Everson and Quinn.
Wow. So where's the story going next? Is it still going to be in the young adult series? Are you moving older, younger?
Okay, so when my second Issalia series ends, I left the door open for another series, but at the same time, I've been writing the same books for 5 years straight. So I thought, oh, it's time for me to do something different, and I had some ideas ready to go. Now the series is probably mid-teens to adults. Largely because the main characters range from 19 to 70 something, right? So they're older characters, but still, I tend to write fairly clean, PG-13 kind of themes. So I don't go too far off into the adult only land. Yeah.
Yeah,
So
I love that about this series. It was great. And it
yeah,
was just,
it's fun.
yeah, I
Yeah,
can
and my
imagine.
next series,
Go
what's
ahead.
that?
I can only
Okay, I was gonna say,
imagine where your imagination goes on these hikes and all these crazy things you do. Go ahead.
yeah, and a big thing for me is I really, really love magic. So whenever I find fantasy books, I gravitate towards how the magic works and what the magic is and the ideas behind it. And that kind of comes through in my earlier series. My second series is driven also by magic, and it's just a different approach to it. And the idea there, it's called Wizardoms, and the idea is wizardom is a kingdom ruled by a wizard. So it's how the magic and the world works it's very closely tied to everything that happens. And then the wizard class ends up being the ruling class, and everybody else is something below them. And it just creates a new set of challenges it's fun to write about. And these wizards, they're not very nice people. They're power hungry, betraying each other, and yeah, and that makes for a little bit of a Game of Thrones dynamic where everybody's trying to get position and seek power. So it's fun too.
Definitely. And it was great the way that you had them discover things along the way about the secrets that are being hidden.
Yeah, discovery is one of my favorite things in anything that I read. So I try to make sure that my readers are going through that process where they're constantly learning about a secret held by the government or how a magic works, or in these books a new rune and what that rune does.
No, it was great because there were consistent rules all the way through. Do you have like a chart that you have set up so that you know exactly what it's supposed to do? How do you create that and capture it to flow in the book?
Yeah, I do some of that, but I think part of making all that work is, I do have that engineering background, so you can see in the inventions I come up with in the books, or the characters come up with, and how the magic, works and is applied. It just have this logical side to me that is kind of keeping track of all that, while the creative side is writing all the characters.
Yeah, the science projects were amazing. That was fun. I like the challenges.
Thanks.
Did you ever teach school?
Not formally, but I do go in and I speak to like English classes every year at local high schools. Talk
Okay.
about how my writing and how I got to where I'm at. Just encourage them. You know, if you want to do something that is maybe not doesn't necessarily pay the bills at day one, but it's your dream, don't give up on your dream. Keep paying the bills and just work on the dream on the side. Yeah.
Definitely. So do you write full time now?
I will as of January. So I'm retiring from the corporate world at the end of the year. So in January, yeah, I'm full-time author.
Wow. What are your hours as an author now combined with your work schedule?
A lot. I probably work over 100 hours a week, which
Wow.
is it's a little draining, but also I really love the author stuff.
Mhm.
So I keep doing it, and I know my end game is to just do that. So if I can, drop the 40 to 50 hour a week day job, I get a whole bunch of time back in my life. That'll be nice. Then I can go on more adventures.
Definitely. What type of engineer are you?
Well, I graduated with a dual degree in manufacturing and mechanical engineering,
Hmm.
but then I ended up taking MBA courses and becoming a product manager. So I'm a product manager for a tech company, and that means that I'm the guy who comes up with what's the next product we need to have and what features does it need to include. And so there's some creativity there as well.
Definitely. Just trying to get in your head and figure out how you spun this incredible tale. So, what's the next series? How many books are going to be in all? So, how many books are in Warden of Purpose, The Runes,
Yeah.
and the next series?
Okay. So Runes of Issalia is a trilogy, and I also wrote like a prequel set 400 years before that series occurs, just because I built so much history to create the series. I decided, oh, maybe I should tell the events that people talk about and reference in the main series. So I have a prequel, and then the Wardens of Issalia series was 4 books, and my new series will be at least 6 books. I don't know yet because I haven't written all of it, but I've got 6 planned. It may end up being 7 or 8. I don't know.
Wow. I think your fans probably love that because you really get attached to the characters and you want more.
Yeah, well, that's what you hope. I mean, that's how I felt as a reader, my whole life. If I found a series I loved, I couldn't get enough of it.
So you're like the guy who never really grew up and you're
Yeah,
living
sound like my wife.
vicariously. That's so funny. What other recommendations would you give for young people that are interested in writing or creating a world, a different world to escape to?
Yeah. So yeah, writing has so many aspects, right? So you have to figure out what you're going to focus on. But as far as world building, which is an aspect of storytelling, I think it's very important that you consider things like how are the politics that function in the world, and what are the cultural aspects that you really want to focus on, because that affects how the characters behave and how the story is told. Magic, if you're going to write about magic like I do, that should be one of the key things you think of right up front. Now, I would also say, even in fantasy, you don't want to get too crazy and come up with so many terms and things that people can't quite grasp. Focus on the things that you think are unique and make your world special, and make those different and make other things more familiar so that, readers can follow along without being lost.
So for politics, what would you say that the combination was to come up with the Wardens or the Runes? Because in every fantasy novel, you find something that strings along and it reminds you of things that are happening in the real world. Like the schools, the
Yeah.
military school, the magic school. Where did you come up with these kind of ideas?
Yeah, I don't know if I thought too much about the real world for the politics, but I will say, so in the Rune series, there's a very controlling empire that governs everybody, and it's church and state combined into one. So that makes them very powerful because not only do they set the laws you have to live by, but they tell you, hey, if you want to, you know, have a good afterlife or next life or whatever it is, right? Here's how you need to behave too. Um, so that type of power creates like a cult like mentality among the people, right? So that was very important to me in order to make the main character Brock this outcast. And why is he this outcast? You kind of find out as the story goes along that there's a little bit of conspiracy there behind by this controlling government. So it's a little dystopian, in that manner. Later on, things are different by the time the Wardens series comes out. So, there's an 18-year gap. Now we have kingdoms. So we're back to kingdoms, which was how, before the Empire took over. But then a new empire kind of starts rising, and they have special weapons, and they're trying to like take over, and it comes down to them thinking that magic's evil. So they want to squash magic and they want it gone, and they're using these weapons. So it's magic versus these fire-powered weapons. So it's more like a conflict of ideals than good versus evil. Yeah.
Yeah, it is. Definitely. And also, it had a lot of tolerance and compassion along the way.
Yeah, I think that if you can instill a little bit of that into people as they read, so they're more understanding toward others, it's only good, right? Because think how much better our world would be if we were more compassionate and more tolerant.
Definitely. And you show the payoffs, of coming together with different backgrounds, diversities, and how you can create something and achieve, you know, much higher standards. That was really well done.
Thanks. Yeah, I've seen some of that in my own life. Just being in teams at work or volunteer organizations or whatever it is, and I think that it's important. Yeah.
Definitely. What type of volunteer things do you do?
Well, I mean, I was in volunteer organizations for my kids' high school for years, right, and before that, middle school, etc. But right now, I'm in one organization called Huntington Beach, which is the city I live in, reads one book. So we pick one book that is centered around some sort of, social issue like diversity or, whatever it is. But it's about social awareness. And then we get local high schools to read the book and the community to read the book. And then we bring everybody together, bring in the author and talk about the book and what we learned and, whether it's about homelessness or, prejudice or whatever it is, just create this awareness and make sure you're getting it into these teenagers as they go out into the world. Maybe they're a little bit more well-rounded. So that's one that I'm in right now.
Wow,
Actually,
that's
VP.
great.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah,
That's such a great idea to bring the community together, too.
yeah, it's a good organization, and hopefully it keeps growing and getting more and more momentum. Yeah.
Great. So, what was your absolute favorite book growing up?
Okay. Actually, so I mentioned the Belgariad. So Belgariad would be my favorite series as a teenager, right? And that's by David Eddings. That's from like the 80s, but it's still just a fun series with coming of age elements and magic and good and evil and all this stuff. So that would be growing up my favorite. As an adult, I really enjoy Robert Jordan's Wheel of Time series. It's 14 books and each one is, like 1,000 pages. So it's a big undertaking, but I just love the world that he built and the characters that are in it. So, I could go back and reread that series again. I've already read it like 3 times. So,
Wow, that's fantastic. Thank you for sharing so much about your stories and where you get your ideas because they're
yeah.
really enjoyable. I
Yeah,
love
thanks
them
for having me.
both. Oh, my pleasure. Until next time, keep asking questions. But if you want a really good series, either one of these will keep you spellbound. We'll see you soon.